India's embassy in Kuwait says around 40 of its citizens have died in a fire. The blaze tore through a building housing foreign workers in the Mangaf area outside the Kuwaiti capital. It also killed at least 9 others. Human rights groups have frequently raised concerns over living conditions for migrant labourers in the Gulf state.
Fire, smoke and people screaming. Many of those sleeping when fire engulfed their building in the early hours of Wednesday didn't survive. Kuwaiti officials have reported that dozens of foreign workers living in the housing block died, most of them reportedly Indian nationals.
The number of workers in this building exceeded 50 people. It was found that the fire started on the ground floor with some violations committed by the building's owners. This contributed to the rapid spread of the fire.
Kuwaiti officials say they will investigate the cause of the fire.
We will address the issue of labour overcrowding. I'm now going to see what violations were committed here, and I will deal with the owner of a property.
Overcrowded residential buildings are not unusual in one of the richest countries in the world. 2/3 of Kuwait's population are migrants who are often low-paid and live in overcrowded accommodations. Something Indian politicians called out in the wake of the fire.
This tragedy is a reminder of the terrible privations our migrant workers undergo in their efforts to support their families at home. When Indian workers are sent abroad, they must have contractual assurances of decent conditions of life, work, pay and residence before they leave our shores.
As the investigation into the fire's cause continues, the office of India's Prime Minister has promised payments of €2,200 to fire victims' next of kin.
Well, Jessica Hagen-Zanker is a senior research fellow from the Overseas Development Institute. That's a think tank that focuses on social justice and sustainability. She's an expert on the rights and welfare of migrant workers in Gulf countries. Welcome to DW. Kuwait, one of the world's richest countries, and this is not the first time working conditions for migrant workers have been called into question. What do you expect to come out of this latest investigation by the Interior Ministry?
Yeah, this is obviously a huge tragedy that these workers have died, and as was also highlighted in the tweet that you showed on the screen, these workers would have invested a lot of money and sacrifice to make a better life for themselves and for their families. And this tragedy is very visible because of the sheer numbers of people that have died. But sadly, it's a common occurrence, and every day migrant workers in the Gulf die and get injured because of their working and living conditions. What do I expect will change because of this? I think the attention that's being paid to this tragedy is really important and is really good, and hopefully means that in this particular instance, the investigation will be thorough and will result in the prosecution of landlords and others involved. But more generally, with the more everyday occurrences of one person dying or a few people dying, we see that their voices or their voices of their fellow migrant workers, of migrants in general, aren't being heard. And also they don't have access to justice, and they don't tend to receive a lot of support from the country of destination, from countries like Kuwait, but also the origin countries who could do a lot more.
And so what is it then, given that this is such a rich country, what is it about Kuwait, or what is it about these migrant workers, or what is it about the way that Kuwait regards these migrant workers that mean their conditions are often so appalling?
Well, it's very much an unequal position of power, right? And migrant workers are being recruited to work in the private sector in Kuwait and other Gulf countries. And the private sector is where nationals don't want to work because the working conditions are a lot worse, pay is a lot lower, but also access to, for example, social protection benefits such as protection and provisions when they have an injury or disability as a result of their work are a lot lower and a lot poorer. And for example, employment injury does now exist for Kuwait. In general, we have seen improvements across the Gulf region in terms of labor rights and also some provisions that are being rolled out to migrant workers as well, but they tend to be more substandard. So, for example, in terms of employment injury, migrant workers receive employment injury benefits when it happens at a workplace, and also their next of kin receives these benefits in the event of a death.
Right.
But if they die not in their residence, which is obviously very much related to their working conditions, they do not receive it.
Okay.
So these families would not get any benefits,
any compensation.
related
Okay.
to.
Thank you so much for talking us through that. Jessica Hagen-Sanker from the Overseas Development Institute. Thank you so much.